Right. So for the first talk of the evening, we're having Katie Lyne talk about CivTech. So, Katie.
So yeah, Marius stole my opening line. I'm Katie, and I'm from CivTech. Has anybody heard of CivTech? Apart from you lot, because it's a new government project, so no one should have heard of it, and I'm here to tell you all about it. Basically, CivTech stands for Civic Technology, and our mission is to drive daring and innovation into the civic world, and by that, create better public services. So we aim to create better. Does anyone know what the Scottish Government digital spend was last year? I know, it's not even a pub quiz and there's no prize in the end, but I'm asking the right questions. Close, but no cigar. It was not far off, around 711 million. So and another question, does anyone know what percentage of that went to larger companies? It was around 70%, which is quite a lot. So what we're proposing is we're going to take some of that money and we're going to give small, more innovative companies the opportunity to compete for it. So we're going to go around different public sector organisations like NHS, CEPA, and we're asking them to form open questions that we're going to propose as challenges. Now, like I said, these challenges are going to be delivered out to the SMEs. And what we're going to do is we're going to hook them up with the challenge sponsor, and hopefully some citizens as well, and we're going to put them through what we call the CivTech Innovation Flow. CivTech. With this, we're going to create a collaborative working space, and we think that by doing that, we can get some really good cross-pollination of ideas with innovation. Now, our thinking around this is public sector challenges over the world aren't dissimilar. You could get a flooding problem in Scotland that could be similar to one, say, in Paris. They don't know that that's the summer for us, and we've just swapped over with it. But so after the accelerator, we would work with other partners to put the product out to the global market. We're doing this through a new form of procurement, which I'll come to later. But this is the CivTech Innovation Flow. So we have our little hopper here, which is where we collect all the different sector challenges. We're going for small, medium, large ones. As we're in the pilot at the moment, we're not going too large because we're still testing everything. And then once we get the challenges, we're going to put them out to the digital environment in Scotland. So, like I said, SMEs, but we're also going to put them out to the public sector, to startups, to students, academia, open to everyone. Now, what we're hoping with this is that people are going to write in with solutions. And from these solutions, we will take 3. And we'll put them into, it's selection phase there, but we're calling it an exploratory phase. Now, this is going to be 2 weeks long, and we're going to give each of the 3 companies £2,000. With this, they're going to work on a prototype. And the prototypes will then be selected by the challenge sponsor and a board of relevant bodies and taken into our accelerator. That's going to be 100 days, and each team is going to get £15,000. With this, they're going to work on a minimum viable product with the challenge sponsor and with input from citizens, and hopefully take it to market. Now, the bit with procurement is called pre-commercial procurement. And last question, I promise, I don't think anyone here has heard of pre-commercial procurement. It's a new thing that's come about, and what we're going to use it for, it means that we can procure services while they're still in the research and development stage, which hasn't really been done before. So it gives us the opportunity, like I said, to work with new and innovative solutions, to get input from citizens, so people who will actually use the services and create a product. What we're asking from the challenge sponsors is about £106,000, because then it falls below what we call the EU threshold, and then we don't have to put it out to a wider procurement, so we can still keep it within Scotland. Now, my talk went a little bit faster than I thought it would. It's strange how when you practice you expect. The timelines at the moment are, well, they're approaching, basically, and we are hoping to put the challenges out in the next couple of weeks. So as you can read there, it's around the environment. We've got some from health, from Police Scotland, Transport Scotland. There's a whole range of things that would happen. So if you think that this could be something that would be interesting to you, maybe look out in the next couple of weeks for the challenges that will be coming out. And we'd need you to be free from June till July, because that's when the selection phase is going on. If you're successful in that, then we'd also ask that you're free from September to December, because that's when we'd want to run the accelerator, so we can really do that. In a nutshell, that's what we're going to do. And hopefully it's A little more exciting than any other government talks that you've been to? Can I take any questions? Oh, you can. Okay.
Where, you said, where is this accelerator program taking place? Like, what's the location? Is there a location?
So for the pilot, the accelerator program will take place in Edinburgh. We are currently confirming where it will be held, but it will hopefully be somewhere local.
Are you only supporting startup business models, or are you also supporting other things like social enterprises or even short-lived
We're
projects?
opening it up to everyone. That's kind of the good thing that we've got going at the moment is it could be startups, it could be students who, they see the challenge and they go, I've got a great idea, I just don't have a company. Doesn't necessarily matter. All you need is to have the company established by the time that you would come into the accelerator. So it's open to everyone. Yeah.
The 15 grand for the 100 days thing, is that per person or per team?
No. Oh. I know we're given a bit of that 711 million, but we're not given that much. That is per team, and it doesn't matter how many people are in the team. So people go, oh, I've got a really big team, I'm going to need some more. Like, oh, well, sorry.
So that means if you have 3 people, they're on minimum wage.
Yeah, well, it's the money that we're giving them. We aren't paying them for their services. We are giving them a grant so that they can develop the service that can be taken forward and put out to the public sector.
Or in cases of 2 teams, not put out to the public sector.
Well, we will, what we're saying is if there are 2 really good solutions for one challenge, we won't disqualify anyone, but it would have to be 2 very, very good solutions to be brought through to the accelerator to get the 15 grand. That's what they are competing for when they get the 2K in the exploration phase.
So you just said like these are grants, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not like loans that you're meant to pay back.
Nope. The money will be given to the company. We're not taking IP. We're not taking equity. All that we ask from that is that any background IP that is used for the service will be shared with the public sector, and that the service that is created during the accelerator will be made available to the public service after that as well. Yeah.
So just on that note, is broader open source encouraged?
Sorry?
Is a broader sense of open source encouraged, or is it specifically something that we want to deliver as a proprietary solution to the government?
Do you mean like I'm speaking to digital people and I don't really know much about digital. You mean like source code?
So if you imagine, let me broaden the concept. If we produced something using this grant, would the idea that we'd share it more freely with other people, so other governments perhaps, or the commercial sector?
So that is up to you. We are specifically concerned with that public sector. So, for example, if it was NHS and they wanted you to work on a product or a service, so we would say anything that you bring to use to create that product or service, that is made accessible to them. What you work on in the accelerator is also made accessible to them. However, once the 100 days are over and once that contract is finished, there's no obligation to continue with that. The companies can take it wherever they want to take it. We think that having invested a certain amount of money into that already, it is likely that the public sector will want to, go forward with it. But there are no guarantees on either end. Anyone else?
So does that mean that you finish the project and then you've got no obligation? What obligations do you have to?
One of the reasons that this came about was we found that a lot of small and enterprising companies had some really great ideas, but they didn't always. You need the first buyer to get the investment to get the idea running. So our way of doing things is kind of solving that. You are given the money and you have the buyer who will take forward, unless something very drastic happens, what is created in the accelerator will be taken forward by the public service, and that's what they will be using it for. Does that answer the question?
Was this who pays and what's the price after that?
Well, after that, as in from the company, or as in from other public sectors?
So it's just around the licensing of, so I produce a product for you,
Mm-hmm.
and it maybe requires either some proprietary knowledge to set up or run. how is that then negotiated, or?
That would be, some of the things might be negotiated. We're still working out a couple of things like bringing forward, stuff like that. But did I get back to you? And if anyone else is interested, that is my email and contact details. If there are any questions.
I have one more question.
Oh, you again.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Can companies work on more than one challenge? So is there going to be a bias saying, hey,
Well,
we're going to share out? Or?
You could, but not at the same time. If there was a challenge that you want to apply for afterwards, then just because someone's been through doesn't mean they can't come through again. Part of what we're doing in the accelerator is we're going to have a dedicated program and program leaders. So, for example, for those companies that maybe aren't accustomed to working with the public sector, with legal documents or procurement, things like that, we are going to have workshops in place to kind of guide people around that so they don't always get tripped up by certain things that others can fall accustomed to. Yes,
You're a startup yourself. Have you tested any parts of your process? Do you have any success stories you can talk about?
Funny you should mention that. So there's some people called Product Forge. Oh, you're here. Yeah, we did a hackathon. One of the things that we were testing was we did a hackathon with Alan's company, Product Forge, in October last year. And it was similar to the structure that we're doing at the moment, but like I said, we were in the pilot, so we were tweaking things then. And one of the companies that came through, they were given 3 broad challenges, which was around digital service for libraries, homelessness, and finance. And one of the companies that worked on a project for the homeless are actually been taken forward and creating the idea that they came up with, which is pretty exciting as well. So, yeah.
If this is successful, do you think there'll be further investment in future years?
Well, we, like I said, we are piloting it, but usually if the pilot goes well, then yeah, we should be hoping to run a second cohort next year. Hopefully.
Anyone else?
Like I said, if there are any questions that you do want to shout them out, please take down my email. Feel free to come and talk to me afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katie. So what we're going to do is have a 10-minute break. I'm looking at Mike as he's giving a second talk. I don't know how long this talk is. Yeah. Okay, so 15-minute break amongst yourselves, and we'll be back at past with Microsoft. Thank you.
Yeah. Adrian, you're just walking up and down.
Shoot, where to move to. I was about to sit here, and then I thought it's something for the camera sitting there. Oh, it's fine, I think it's on there. Yeah, I was just wondering about
So like, we're trying to come up with a plan.
you could take a seat, please. We're going to start the second talk of the evening.
Oh, it's the border between France and...
So for our second talk, we're going to have Mike here tell us how GitHub builds software.
Better to speak like this or into the microphone? Microphone better? Yeah. Okay, cool. So the screen's a little bit smaller than I thought it was, so you probably can't read anything on any of the slides, but that's going to be okay. So we're going to do something a little bit different to usual in that because I'm going to kind of cover quite a lot of stuff at like surface level, let's try and see what happens if you have questions about stuff, like ask them throughout. And I might terminate this idea like halfway through. But let's try this and see how it goes. Right, so this is me. It's even the same t-shirt. I don't have the dog, unfortunately. Yes.
Where do I get that t-shirt?
The internet. I think no, in fact, you can't get this one. But we do have a new one. We've got because it's Pride Month this month, I think, or in America or something. So yeah, we have a Pride t-shirt and we have a Transocat t-shirt as well, so you'll be able to buy them shortly. I'm not meant to talk about that yet. Yes?
What's your dog called?
Dog is called Lucy. She is a senior engineer at GitHub. That is how you can contact her. She is a Cocker Spaniel. Let's the question thing has already started going slightly awry. So I may or may not choose to accept your question. Moving on. So I'm going to give you this lovely overview, which you can't read, of how GitHub builds software. What I'm going to talk to you about is, because I figured it's kind of interesting, I think, not just the way we kind of deploy software or write software or whatever. Quite often, like, we end up doing talks about like one of these individual things. So I figured it'd be interesting to do like a talk based on, okay, you're an engineer at GitHub, and you get given a laptop, and you haven't done anything to that laptop. Like, let's talk about like what it looks like to go from you having a new laptop to you pushing code to production. So, first thing we do is this little project thing that I built called Strap. So before there was Strap, there was a thing called Boxen. Boxen was like a previous GitHub project that used Puppet to like manage people's development machines, and basically that was a bad idea. I'm not going to get into much details, but effectively my high-level thinking, having used Puppet and Chef in situations more or less universally where they're a bad idea, is that they work well for what they're designed for. They don't work well when people monkey around with the computer underneath, and then Puppet goes, hey, I'm going to do some stuff. Oh, you've changed everything, and then dies. So as I alluded to earlier on, I replaced a multi-thousand lines of Puppet and stuff with a 100-line bash script instead. So this is what Strap does. You can go to this strap.githubapp.com, or there's you can basically with one click spin it up on Heroku. It's not that one. I'll show you another thing in a second. Basically, what it does is installs a minimal set of stuff that is probably useful for developers. Now, by minimal set, I mean really minimal, because I hate having cruft on my machine. So pretty much all it does is stuff like turn on File Vault, set up your GitHub credentials so you can clone repositories and stuff like that. Installs Homebrew, but doesn't actually install anything in Homebrew and stuff like that. Installs Homebrew because I'm a Homebrew maintainer as well, so I'm biased. So basically the way it works is you get your new laptop, you then go to this site, it will then ask you to log in using your GitHub details, you log in doing that, and then you have a little script that you download. Note I'm not doing the whole pipe the bash script into the terminal thing, because I would actually have done that, but it was going to be harder, so I didn't. Yes? Sorry, no, someone was waving or something. Who knows? Right, so I downloaded the script onto my machine. I then run it with bash like this. It's then asking for my password, so it can go and do stuff like turn on File Vault and other things that require root, unfortunately. So it then goes and does a bunch of stuff, and then at the end, you might see something that looks a bit like this. Your system is now strapped. It doesn't take very long. It takes maybe 5 or 10 minutes the first time. It's designed to be rerun multiple times, but you shouldn't have to rerun it multiple times. It's basically just a one-off fire and forget thing, and then your machine is set up. What's happened here is a cool little integration it has as well with a thing I kind of helped work on called Homebrew Bundle. And what Homebrew Bundle does is it uses like a brew file, which is kind of like a gem file. You guys familiar with like gem files or similar type things? Basically, a way of specifying all your project dependencies. It's like that, but for stuff in Homebrew, and specifying system dependencies. So I basically have that, so I can have a bunch of stuff. I say when I set up a new machine, like in my .files repository, it knows to automatically go and download like this brew file if it's not there already, and install everything there. So it can install stuff from Homebrew, Homebrew Cask, and now the Mac App Store as well. So it's installed for me like Xcode and Vagrant and all these other things. Right, so this is open source, the strap thing. You can go on like McQuaid/strap on GitHub and like access the code, and it's got a one-click put it on Heroku thing as well. Any question?
Sorry, from the previous slide.
Yeah.
I could ask how iMovie is useful for development.
It's not really. It's useful for doing not development, because I try to do as much not development as I can. Yeah.
How is transmission useful?
For downloading Ubuntu ISO. That's the last time I used that screenshot again. So yeah, and then this is like my little brew file thing. It's also in my .files repository if you're interested like in critiquing my software choices, which obviously people are. So yeah, so it's kind of a cool way, and you can kind of dump and restore things from that. So it's kind of a nice way of being like, I want to be able to restore everything on my system in a way that's not like kind of heinous and whatever. Hello.
What's the GitHubapp.com?
GitHub app, that is the GitHub like desktop app. GitHub for Mac. It's like designed to be kind of like a novice UI for using Git. But I find it useful for doing like one thing that I really like UIs for with GitHub, which is like individual like staging individual lines to the index. Anyway, moving on. So Homebrew Bundle, this is this other thing you can do. It's part of Homebrew. You run like Brew Bundle, and it will set stuff up in Brew files. It's very exciting. Right, so you've now got Strap on your machine. This is very good. So now you want to get GitHub on your machine so you can actually do some work. So we go and make ourselves a little GitHub directory. That's just a little convention we do internally, and then we cd do it, and then we clone it. And then obviously that is going to go download like GitHub. That's like where the bulk of the site is. GitHub is mainly like, not entirely, but like mainly a kind of monolithic Rails app. See, you can make Rails scale. And so this is a kind of download it to the machine, and then when that's all done at the end, then the next thing we have is we've got a nice little principle on GitHub projects that we try and keep the setup for any given project, and similarly like what CI looks like, what testing looks like, whatever, effectively consistent between every project. So what we have is we have the script subdirectory, and in the script subdirectory you have in pretty much every project a thing called Bootstrap. So what that does is basically says, okay, I have a machine which assumes nothing except you have Strap installed. So at this point, I do not have MySQL installed, I do not have any Rubies installed, I do not have Git installed, I do not have any of these type of things. So this is at this point, sorry, I do have Git installed, that's a lie, because it comes with OS X. But you basically don't have what you would consider system dependencies already installed, and this Bootstrap strip will then go through the brew file and actually install that stuff for you. I think that's kind of cool, because I always find when I go and use a new project, like I hate having some wiki page or whatever that's like, you need to manually install these 100 things, then run these 100 scripts, then you need to ask Bob what to do next, but Bob left the company 2 years ago, and yeah, you probably just can't do any work for a week, so.
Is it still compiling everything?
Yeah, so this Bootstrap, it may compile things, like basically it's a really like high level abstraction, so it can do more or less whatever it needs to do. So sometimes it will pull binaries off the internet, sometimes it will compile things, sometimes it will do other things. Like it basically, its job is at the end, you should be able to run another script, which I'm not actually going to show you today, but like you should be able to run, if it's like a web app, like script server afterwards, and script server will just work and will like spin up a web server on your machine so you can like run the application. Right, so while it's going through, it's doing stuff like this. It's installed some gems, it's put some files in some places, it's downloaded GitHub's own internal fork of Git, because we do things with Git. And then, as you said, it's compiled it and built these things. It's going away, doing npm and all this type of thing. And then at the end, eventually it's done. It's also nicely set up our kind of local database and stuff like that for us as well. And then we're all good to go. We're done. We have our special GitHub Ruby, and the bootstrap is finished. So now we can actually start doing some work. So if you're interested in the way this stuff is done, we have a repository for this called Scripts to Rule Them All at GitHub, which is sort of example template scripts. These actual template scripts look almost identical to what they look like in some of our kind of more simple projects. The GitHub template script has to do loads of stuff because it's setting up a few, like I said, it's mostly a monolithic Rails app. It also sets up a few of the other projects that it needs. But for some of our smaller projects, some of the kind of microservices we run, these bootstrap scripts are 10 lines of bash. So they can be really, really nice and simple. And you can go to see bootstrap script in there. You can see it's kind of referring to blue files here if you're on Darwin, which is the kernel name on OS X. So then after that, it's time for me to write code. And because I am relatively old, I still use TechMeet. I think I'm the only person still using TechMeet. All the cool kids now use Sublime and Atom and things like that. Please don't tell my coworkers I'm not using Atom because I'll get in trouble. But yeah, so I pop up my editor, and then I don't show you any code because I decided to be boring. And then I do some stuff. And then after I've done some stuff, I run git diff, and it says, in fact, I have done stuff. I have changed 4 lines in this model. So the fun thing with this thing today is partly due to my lack of preparation and partly due to trying to make this a real example. This is actually, from now on, this is actually code that I ran and deployed to production today. And the stuff you're seeing actually happened. Should have some disclaimer or something like that. Anyway, so next thing, obviously, we're dealing with Git, so we go and create ourselves a nice little branch. Git's telling us, hey, this file's still not modified, it's still not committed, so you might want to do something about that. So I do something about that, I commit it, write a nice commit message. Basically, this is what I was doing this morning. The boring little story is we're using things called serialized attributes. This is what I was doing today, which is a way of putting a JSON blob in a database column, so you don't have to do migrations. Turns out that's a bad idea in the long term. So we've been killing these, and one of the things you have to do when you're removing columns, sometimes in Rails, is we have this little thing called attribute ignore, which stops Rails from exploding when you want to remove columns underneath it that it thinks should exist and stuff like that. So this is what this does, and this is what I'm writing about here. So I got my commit message, I then commit, I now have a commit on my machine, very exciting, and my branch and stuff. So now I'm going to go push this onto GitHub, create a new branch, go onto GitHub itself, and then if you use GitHub or not, I don't know, you get this nice little thing at the bottom that says, hey, you might want to create a pull request there from this new branch you've got there, buddy. So I'm going to now open a pull request. And this is going to get interesting again soon. I realize there's a point in the middle where we're doing, because everyone's used to GitHub at this point, where it's yes, we all know this, we all do this 100 times every day. Why are you showing this boring bit? But it's going to get good. Don't worry. Right, so this is another little convention we tend to do. We make use of kind of teams and stuff on GitHub and individuals. So I'm basically going and seeing a few of my coworkers to ask them for some review. We generally try, and unless something's everything is on fire and it's falling down, we try to get at least one person to review every single change we make to any project at the company, because humans are terrible and it's a good idea to verify that they're being terrible with 2 people rather than 1. So we also like to use gratuitous use of emoji instead of words because pictures are better or something. So in this case I've CC'd the person who was working on this thing before I was, and my team that I work on, so they can kind of check that I'm actually still occasionally doing it. Right, so we then have, after we push up this branch, we have a lot of CI jobs that run. As you can see, this project has relatively few in that we only have 15 separate CI jobs. There's some that have 30. We actually have, fun fact, I don't know if this is still the case today, but last time I checked, GitHub had more CI machines than any other type of machines in the company. Because waiting for builds is really boring. So you want to be able to go and push stuff up and have all your builds run in a very short period of time. And when you have huge test suites, it's also nice to not be able to not have to do that on your local machine. You can still run tests on your local machine, but it takes forever, and let's just throw lots of hardware at it instead. So we have all these different things. we have this GitHub Enterprise product that I used to work on, so it's like checking that we've not broken that, and GitHub, and then GitHub with like various flags enabled and disabled and whatever. I'm running through a test suite in various different ways. So then after that, this is when it starts to get a little more interesting. So now I've decided that my code is like, yeah, it's good enough that I can go and like start planning at least to put in production. So we have, this is in Slack, we have this like Slack bot that was previously a Campfire bot called Qbot. And you ask Qbot to do things, and he does things for you, and that's cool. So here what I'm doing, on a lot of projects what I could do is just say like deploy straight to production. But because I'm working on the main GitHub app, like it turns out that's actually like pretty busy and pretty congested. Like even, thankfully I'm in UK hours, so like it's not that congested for me. But when I went to deploy this morning, there were like 3 other people already either waiting to or currently kind of deploying. So basically you do this to be polite and kind of get in the queue. So it says there's one other person ahead of me right now. So queue for GitHub, there's currently one guy, Arthur, who's testing in production. His code is what's on the website right now. And then there's Miguel and me who are currently kind of waiting to deploy our code. So Miguel shows up in my PR, because he's on my team, and says, like, looks good to me, love a PR when it only contains deleted code. I also agree with that sentiment. So at this stage as well, all the CI jobs have passed, but it's whining at the bottom about it's out of date with the base branch. So basically we'll talk about that more a little bit in a second, but that's like a thing you can enable now to basically just say, like, hey, you might want to merge master into your branch. But I'm not going to do that right this second, because like master's changing all the time. If there's 2 people ahead of me, I'll talk about more about this in a second, but with the deploy, the way we do deploys, if there's 2 people ahead of me, that's master going to change probably once or twice more before I come to do my deploy. So let's push on with this. Right. So because he said that that's good to go, some nice timing here is that it's now time for me to deploy. I'll just note as well, on the previous one, I had merged master in once before just to make sure that things aren't too weird. And I made another change in that like PR before Miguel came along and said that. So Qbot is now, I've got to the front of the deployment queue, so it's now time for me to deploy to production. So what I do now is, this is how you deploy at GitHub. This is one of the things I think is the best of the company, and it's one of the things that kind of terrifies people, in that you don't need to speak to anyone, you don't need to ask anyone permission, whatever. Like in your first week, you will be encouraged to do this and deploy actual code to production. Every engineer in the company, regardless of whether they work on this app or that or whatever, they can deploy code to any app at any time, more or less. There's times, obviously, we're getting like attacked or whatever, that people say, okay, let's lock this down to kind of gently discourage people from doing this right now. But even then, that's kind of more a social contract than like an actual one. So our way of dealing with deployment is generally like we put a lot of trust on people. So anyone can deploy, but if you did deploy and you break everything, we're probably going to notice, and we're going to notice that like it was you, and we're going to probably ask questions as to like what happened and why that happened or whatever. So in this case, I'm saying deploy GitHub, which is the app I'm working on right now, my branch name, which is the one I pushed up and I used to create the PR. Again, our deployments always tend to be around like deploying pull requests. We don't kind of put everything to master and then deploy them. We deploy our branches to production. So, and I'm saying to production/canary. This is saying a subset of our production hosts, the canary in the coal mine. So if things start exploding, then that's a few hosts that are exploding and not all of the hosts. So then Qbot has nicely merged master into my branch here, and then like push that to the branch, and then when the CI finishes, Qbot will then deploy. Now the reason why Qbot merges master in is because you want to make sure that whatever the last person did on their branch, particularly like they could have done something which was pushing some really, really important fix, they commit that to master. I haven't been paying attention, I haven't noticed that they've done that. If I deployed there, if master wasn't merged into my branch, then I would just undo their fix when I deploy my branch to production. And that would be bad. So, at this point, I then go and it says we're deploying to all these machines, which is the subset that Canary is dealing with. And then it has some nice little gentle things at the bottom saying like check out this stuff to make sure if you've broken anything. The other nice thing with a convention example, which I'm not going to show you today, if you skip the canary deployment, Hubot is just really passive aggressive. So instead of blocking you, it just says, Hubot says, skipping the canary deployment, a bold strategy. But lets you do it anyway. So then that's deployed. It takes in this case, it took 34 seconds to deploy that to the subset of machines. And then it's now on me to make sure that deployment has not broken stuff. So I mentioned this deployment confidence dashboard and Haystack. Haystack is our internal New Relic-y thing. We're not going to show you that because it's boring, but I will show you the deployment dashboard because it's exciting. Guess which of the two I built. So this is this dashboard here. There's a bunch of graphs that, unfortunately, if I tried to put them all on the screen, it would be incomprehensible. So you instead have one graph that's incomprehensible instead. Over here, these blue lines correspond to when people have deployed stuff. So that last one at the end, that's me having deployed something there. And then these different colors of lines at the bottom refer to different types of exceptions, basically. GitHub being GitHub, we're being constantly attacked. We're being constantly having people abusing our API and all those sorts of things. So we do have weird exception spikes and things like that. But what I'm looking for here when I go to the deployment confidence dashboard is basically that the number of exceptions hasn't gone like that when I deploy. If it's, as you have here, we've got slow queries, if they are kind of a bit spiky and stuff like that before, then that's okay. I know that if that happens during my deployment, I'm okay, because this isn't something weird that's happened due to me. This is just kind of background noise.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I can't quite see from here. What's the time axis like on that?
So we have timing here. You can actually adjust it at the top of the page a little bit. I've cropped off, but this has gone from 1:48 in the morning San Francisco time until 2:16 at the end. But at the top of the page, as I say that I've cropped off, you can adjust that to be, the time axis to be anywhere from 15 minutes to 30 days to kind of look at patterns, obviously, when you're kind of interested on how much is me and my background noise versus the kind of general noise. And obviously, the way our traffic behaves varies from day to day during the week and stuff as well. So it's sometimes useful to look at a 7-day axis and whatever. And then here on the left-hand side, we have the number of exceptions that are going on per minute. So after my deploy has been in Canary for long enough, and I've not been paged, and none of my coworkers have been paged by me being bad, then Hubot goes and says, okay, you've been in production long enough for the Canary, at least, probably all right to deploy to production properly. So I now then run this command below, and then that's going to go and deploy that to every production machine that we have. Yep.
How's the bot determining an adequate time in production for your Canary?
So it's doing it based on basically just the amount of time. Since the deployment finished, it's basically after that got some timer in the background, which is going and then looking. And if there's not, I think it's also triggered such that if no one has been paged due to an incident happening, then that's decided that is an okay metric. You've not broken anything badly enough for people to be working in the middle of the night. Therefore, you're probably safe to go through. But at this point, anyway, you would generally always still be checking stuff and making sure that you definitely haven't broken stuff. So after that, it's going to go and deploy through. It then takes 148 seconds to deploy to all our production machines, and then I get this again, just a reminder to go and check that I haven't broken things, because yeah, we do this sometimes. The fun fact, in very early GitHub days, some of you may remember this, this stuff used to also include checking Twitter to make sure, see if anyone is currently complaining about GitHub being broken. So then I'm going to go back to the deployment confidence dashboard. I now have my little blue line from 2.14 back there, and my other little blue line from my new deployment back there. It's started to kind of creak up a little bit, so that's a little bit concerning, but I'm not going to be too concerned about that. And then in the PR itself, and again, you can all do this through the API. This is all fully supported stuff. It nicely tells me, okay, I've done these deployments here, deployed to Canary, and then I deployed to production. So now in the pull request itself, it's now showing people if they come along with this pull request, that I have been a good boy, and I went to Canary first, and I've not just merged as the master without testing it, so that would also be bad. So then after this, I'm relatively confident this code is working, it's fine. I then merge this pull request in. So then what that's going to do after that is that it says the next person in the deployment queue can then go off and deploy stuff themselves. It's worth maybe mentioning a little bit, because I've heard a lot of different ways that people do deployment. And I've kind of worked at a few companies that do deployment in different ways. And I'm of the humble opinion that this is the best and possibly the only decent way of deploying to web apps like this at scale. And the reason why is because the thing that quite a lot of companies do is kind of this idea of you maybe deploy whatever 4 times a day, 10 times a day, whatever, or in big organizations 4 times a month, 4 times a decade, whatever. The problem with that is if you have a bunch of people working on stuff and one of them breaks something in that time period, how do you determine who broke what and when? If you're dealing with pull requests and branches and stuff like that, if you're not going to be deploying each pull request to production like this, then if you're deploying instead 4 pull requests, 10 pull requests, 100 pull requests, when one of them breaks something, how do you know which one? How do you know who broke it? How do you know what they were doing and whether that breakage is maybe, like, whether there's stuff in that production deploy that's more important than the breakage or whatever? And I think the nice thing I really like about this model, at least, is it's a way of basically, A, putting the responsibility in the hands of the developer, is that we have an infrastructure team and they kind of keep an eye on us and make sure our systems are running properly. But whether I break something in my production is down to the individual developer. And all of our engineers and most of our designers and kind of product people even as well, if they're making changes to the site, they will be the ones who deploy it to production, they will be the ones who monitor it. They will be the ones who choose whether or not to back it out, whether the stuff's broken, or whether to kind of merge the pull request and kind of move things forward if things are working. And for me at least, like, that's a nice way of balancing the kind of responsibility aspect with the being able to identify what problems are early on aspect. So, after all this has happened, I then sporadically am going to go and check the deployment confidence dashboard again, because I still, even though it's merged and stuff like that, it's someone else's stuff, still want to make sure that I haven't broken anything, because breaking things is bad. And that's basically it. So you've seen through this flow, like, what I did, for example, today to actually, like, push a change to production. And this is something that probably almost every engineer in GitHub is doing, like, probably 0 to 3 times a day. So I can't remember I should have got the number off the top of my head, but the number of deploys we have in a given day is probably, like, we're probably deploying every 10, 20 minutes, pretty much 24 hours of the day, like, all the way through, because we have people in different time zones all around the world. The cool thing is that all this stuff can be done in such a way that we have a smart infrastructure team that means that stuff can be done in such a way that it doesn't disrupt our site, and that we can continue to work and iterate in very small chunks constantly, rather than having, like, big ships where, as I mentioned before, all the kind of risks that come with that approach. So we've run through these things. So first, we bootstrapped our map. That's the default machine you have at GitHub. We cloned GitHub. We bootstrapped GitHub. We wrote some code. We committed it. We created a pull request. We then deployed that to production. We then made sure that we didn't break stuff, and then we merged it. So there's some of the open source projects I mentioned there, and if there's any other questions, please. Yeah.
Yes, I wondered, so what was the system before this Qbot was used?
What was the system that Qbot uses? Qbot is also open source. It's a Node.js based, I think, app. It has various, like, backends that can plug into, like, Campfire, HipChat, Slack, like IRC, Jabber, all these other ones. The way deployments actually happen, that's like an internal app. But, like, it's not really that hard. Like, we provide all this stuff through the deployment API. Basically, all you would need to implement to do that is, however you currently do your deployment process, have Qbot make an HTTP call to whatever your current thing is, saying, hey, I want you to deploy this branch here. And as long as you can do that and make an outgoing HTTP call back to GitHub saying this is what was deployed here and when, then you can, that's it. Like, the deployment thing itself is not that hard, provided you're not, like, manually FTPing machines, manually FTPing files to your machines, which hopefully no one still is. Yeah.
So can you drill down from that dashboard, like into what the actual exceptions are? So you say you know it's like a...
So that's what Haystack is doing, and that's why I kind of didn't dig in there, because there's a certain amount of background noise, and it wouldn't be that interesting, and it maybe might not like make me or GitHub look as good as we should. But yeah, basically, you can, if there was a big spike like that, yeah, your next step would be to jump into Haystack, see what the exceptions are that are spiking. Some examples from the last few weeks, like the two typical things that happen is the good one in some ways is the thing that spikes is, you know, something that's bad in your code, and it's a new exception, you haven't seen it before, and it's spiking because like a bunch of people hit this error. That's the better one. The bad ones are when the kind of background level exceptions all increase. So you've like destroyed somehow performance fairly consistently over the entire site, which means you're probably doing something hideous to the, you know, something hideous to the back end or to a database or whatever. And then those are the ones that are a bit harder to debug, and those are the ones where, again, in probably both those cases, you would then immediately back out your branch. And with the speed of deployments, that means, you know, if you're paying attention, it probably shouldn't affect people for more than kind of, you know, 10 or 20 seconds at worst. Yep.
I think I must have missed it in your talk on the slides, but what is the timescale between deploying to Canary production and then?
So I think it's 15 minutes, or 10 or 15 minutes from Canary to like doing a full production deploy, and then I think afterwards we recommend like 15 to 30 minutes. You kind of are monitoring in production, but again that varies very much on the change you're doing. Like in this case, like I was basically 100% certain that this wasn't going to cause any adverse effects. I tested locally, and I know that like, because I've done this on this same thing on another table before, I know that like the way it's handling this in Rails, and I'm removing dead code effectively at this point. If I was pushing something much more dramatic, I would probably spend a lot more time monitoring it, and then that's afterwards when you would spend time monitoring either other people's deploys because your code's still in production, just to make sure that like you haven't introduced new errors or whatever.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What, you basically block other people deploying until you merge it, or
yeah.
Is that right?
So yeah, the flow is I've got a branch, I deploy the branch. The contents of that branch is now what is deployed in all the production servers. No one else can do any deployments until I'm then done with testing my branch. The result of testing the branch will be one of two things. Either I decide that my branch is not ready for production, in which case I back out, I basically say I'm done, and then the next person goes to the front of the queue, or I merge my branch, like merge my pull request even, and then at that point it then also says the next person can kind of go to the front of the queue. Cool. Yeah. Sorry, Rich over back.
Do you ever think about doing rolling deployment, so you're not doing everywhere all the time, you just roll out a bit and see if it works, like Twitter and Facebook do?
Yeah, so we've been investigating that. I think the tricky thing with us is doing that with the way everything is set up at the moment, and the way stuff like that we handle database migrations, the way we handle assets, stuff like that makes it kind of tricky for us to do that at the moment. I think that's definitely kind of a goal eventually, that we should be able to just, as you say, roll things out a lot more fluidly like that.
If it works, or not in a small bit rather than...
Yeah, yeah. So I guess that's what the Canary is kind of doing a bit of that, like a light version of, we effectively, when we do the Canary, we roll out to like one of each type of worker. So we like have like a front end, a back end, like a background job processor or whatever. So one of each of them like gets this code, and then we like see what happens. But yeah, if that was done automatically stuff like back and stuff now, that would be cool. James.
So you talk about doing it in small pieces, but how do you handle the big releases where everything changes at once? So like last year there was a big UI change of all the tabs and things, so how was that?
Very good question. So those changes are actually often not even a pull request. So what we do is we have, could be a talk by itself. We do things called like staff shipping and dark shipping. So GitHub staff will have like a special like little flag on their profile, and part of that means that we get like opted in or out of certain features. So I had to remember in my screenshots today to go and like turn off the staff mode because everything looks like different because we're trying and experimenting with all these new features. The cool thing about that is that means that that code is all in production right now. Like it's sitting there, it's live, it's just more or less It's not an if statement. We have a more a nicer way of doing things than that. But it's effectively an if statement. Are you staff or are you in this team? If not, give you the old code. If so, give you new code. It's nice because it encourages you to write code that will work with both paths at once. But it also means when you come to ship stuff to production, it's been tested for quite a while, and the actual flipping the switch is just moving that feature from just staff to everyone. But also with those things as well, what we tend to do is that's one where you can do the gradual rollout. You can say, give this to 1% of users, 10%, 25%, 50%, 100%. People doing JavaScript stuff, which I don't do, also do clever things where we dark ship it. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll actually render the entire feature in the background of the page and just not display it to make sure that we're not introducing JavaScript errors and stuff like that. So we can dark ship it such that that new feature is there hiding on the page. You never see it, but that's our way of verifying that it may have rendering issues, but it's not going to bring down the site, for example. And again, we can roll out those dark ships out gradually. So by the time it actually comes to roll out a big massive UI refresh, yeah, it's just a matter of clicking the button instead of having to merge pull request each. Yep.
What are the sort of typical bones of contention between developers and the infrastructure teams?
I guess the usual ones. So it was bad about 2 years ago, there was a badish situation and a bunch of people, myself included, got kind of drafted into the infrastructure team. And there was the usual kind of contention you tend to have with ops people and application people where the ops people felt that because they were the only ones on page rotations and the application people weren't, the application people would just throw stuff over the wall and if everything blew up, that's fine. I don't need to worry about that, I'm not getting paged. And obviously responsible application people would be being responsible, and irresponsible application people would be waking people up at 3 in the morning. Because this is the blessing and curse of a geographically distributed workforce, and one where we don't mandate people work in offices and stuff like that, is that I'm working away quite happily, 9 to 5, and then that's 3 in the morning for someone in San Francisco. So those kind of balances, and then when people are getting woken up again and again and again and again by people being irresponsible, then there's tension. But I think that's something that we've definitely resolved, and a big part of resolving that has been partly infrastructure team, making some of our systems more kind of self-healing, and part of that has also been the application engineers. A lot of them are now taking pagers, and when I say pagers, it's not literal pagers anymore. We use the PagerDuty, and it's integrated with Qbot and stuff like that, such that if you break stuff, you will get paged sometimes as well. And generally having some of our microservices now have their own little pager rotations. I'm on call for this little microservice I manage 50% of the day. But again, this is the classic thing that gets solved in problems like this. But surprise, surprise, that microservice never ever goes down, because the first time it woke me up at 3 in the morning, I'm like, this is never going to go down and wake me up at 3 in the morning ever again. So that's the kind of typical tensions. I would imagine people in here in ops or engineering would kind of relate to that general relationship. And I think, to be honest, I think that is a relatively healthy tension in that, in most companies, if, the ops people might want to make sure that no one ships code ever again because everything's nice and stable and working now and no one's getting paged and it's fine and nothing's on fire. And the application engineers want to ship things 1 million times a day because, if I break it, I can just push out a fix, it's fine, don't worry about it. And that tension, I think, is healthy and it results in better software, and at the same time, software that's kind of iterated on faster stuff. I think we're good. Thank you very much for the questions.
Thank you, Mike. So thanks everyone for coming. I'd like to thank our sponsors again, Skyscanner, Cultivate Informative Ventures. If you could lend us a hand putting the drinks, and there should be bins around here somewhere, I don't know where, and putting the chairs away to the side of the room, that'd be awesome. I think if you want to have drinks afterwards, Blue Blazer is the closest pub we can go to, which is down that way. It's basically next to the building, turn left, it's at the end of the street. So thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you in the next one.
One thing I forgot. if you're interested in that sort of thing, there's some GitHub stickers over there.